close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and imagine that it is the summer of 1590. The Atlantic Ocean stretches endlessly beneath a pale gray sky. Gentle waves rise and fall beneath the wooden hull of an English sailing ship. Every creak of the timbers echoes softly across the quiet sea, while salty wind carries the scent of rain from somewhere beyond the horizon. After months of dangerous sailing, Captain John White finally catches sight of land. His heart fills with hope. 3 years earlier, he had left behind more than 100 men, women, and children on a small island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Among them was his own daughter, and his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the very first English child born in the Americas. For 3 long years, White had been unable to return. War with Spain had consumed England's ships. Storms had delayed every attempt. Every passing season brought another excuse, another obstacle, another year of silence. Now, at last, he was finally coming home. The sailors lowered the anchor as the waves whispered against the shore. The forest stood perfectly still. No welcoming fires. No smoke drifting into the evening sky. No voices. Only silence. At first, White believed the settlers were simply away hunting, perhaps gathering fresh water, perhaps tending crops hidden beyond the trees. He smiled. Everything would soon return to normal. Yet, the silence continued. Step by careful step, the landing party walked inland. Wild grass covered what had once been neat paths. Small wooden fences had collapsed beneath creeping vines. The wind moved gently through the pine trees with a sound almost like distant whispers. The village slowly appeared between the shadows. Every house still stood. Doors remained closed. Cooking pots rested exactly where they had been left. No signs of fire. No broken walls. No scattered weapons. Nothing suggested panic. Nothing suggested battle. It was as though the entire colony had simply paused. Captain White called out familiar names. No answer came. He searched every cabin, every storage building, every corner of the settlement. The silence grew heavier with every passing minute. Then, one of the sailors stopped. Carved carefully into a weathered wooden post was a single word: Croatoan. Nothing more. No explanation. No date. No message asking for help. Just one mysterious word. Nearby, another set of letters had been carved into the trunk of a tree. Ciaro. Only the beginning of the same strange name. White remembered an agreement he had made with the settlers before leaving years earlier. If they ever abandoned the colony because of danger, they would carve a Maltese cross beside their message. There was no cross. Only the word, Croatoan. Was it the name of an island? A friendly native tribe? A destination? Or the final clue left behind by an entire community that had vanished without a trace? More than 400 years later, no one can answer with certainty. The lost colony of Roanoke remains one of history's oldest and most haunting mysteries. Tonight, as the wind drifts softly through forgotten forests, and gentle waves continue to wash against those lonely shores, we will slowly retrace every step of that remarkable journey, not in search of frightening legends, but in quiet search of the people who simply disappeared. So settle in, relax, and let the mystery unfold. Before the colony vanished, before the mysterious word was carved into weathered wood, before history became legend, there was only a dream born thousands of miles away, across the restless Atlantic Ocean, in the Kingdom of England. During the late 16th century, England stood on the edge of a new age. Spanish treasure ships returned home carrying unimaginable wealth from the Americas. Gold, silver, rare plants, exotic animals. Entire civilizations had transformed Spain into the richest empire on earth. Queen Elizabeth I watched carefully. England wanted its own place in this expanding world. Explorers spoke of endless forests filled with towering trees, rivers rich with fish, and fertile soil stretching farther than the eye could see. They imagined prosperous towns, thriving farms, and safe harbors where English ships could cross the Atlantic with ease. Among those dreamers stood one ambitious man, Sir Walter Raleigh. He was a soldier, a courtier, a poet, and above all, a visionary. Raleigh believed England could establish permanent settlements in the mysterious lands across the ocean. Not simply military forts, not temporary trading posts, but real communities, families, children, entire villages that would one day become a New England. Queen Elizabeth supported his vision. She granted Raleigh permission to establish colonies along the vast, largely unexplored coastline that English maps simply called Virginia. The name honored the unmarried queen herself, the Virgin Queen. The first attempts ended in disappointment. Small expeditions struggled against storms, disease, scarcity of food, and the enormous challenge of surviving in an unfamiliar wilderness. Yet Raleigh refused to surrender. In 1587, a new expedition prepared to sail. This time, it would be different. Instead of soldiers alone, entire families would make the journey. Men, women, children, craftsmen, farmers, builders, people who intended not merely to explore, but to stay forever. Leading them was John White. Unlike many explorers of his era, White possessed remarkable artistic talent. He painted detailed scenes of the American landscape, this wildlife, this forest, and the native peoples who welcomed, or sometimes cautiously observed, the English newcomers. His illustrations remain among the earliest visual records of North America. As the fleet departed England, excitement mixed quietly with fear. No one truly knew what waited beyond the horizon. Months at sea tested every passenger. Storms shook the wooden ships. Fresh water slowly spoiled. Food became scarce. Many fell ill. Children cried through long nights, while waves crashed endlessly against the hull. Still, hope remained stronger than hardship. Every sunrise brought them closer to a place where they believed new lives awaited. Finally, after weeks upon the vast Atlantic, the coastline appeared. Green forests stretched to the horizon. Gentle rivers wound toward the sea. Birds circled overhead. The land looked peaceful, untouched, almost welcoming. The settlers stepped ashore carrying more than supplies. They carried dreams. Dreams of homes built from fresh timber, fields filled with golden crops, children growing up beneath open skies, and a future where England's first permanent American colony would flourish. None of them could possibly imagine that within only a few short years, their settlement would become one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, and that more than 4 centuries later, people around the world would still ask the same haunting question: what really happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? The settlers worked from sunrise until the fading light of evening. They built wooden houses, raised protective fences, and cleared fields from the dense coastal forest. Every day brought another challenge: the unfamiliar climate, the strange wildlife, and the constant uncertainty of life in an unknown land. First, the nearby Native American tribes appeared curious. Some welcomed the English settlers. They traded fish, fern, and local knowledge in exchange for metal tools, cloth, and other valuable goods. Without that early assistance, the colony might never have survived its first months. But trust can be as fragile as dry leaves in the wind. Small misunderstandings soon grew into larger problems. Language separated both worlds. Customs were different. Each side struggled to understand the other. At the same time, food supplies began running low. The settlers had expected fresh ships from England to arrive regularly, but the Atlantic Ocean was unpredictable. Storms, and long distances often delayed every voyage. Soon, every meal became precious. Every handful of grain, every fish caught, every drop of fresh water became part of survival. Even so, hope remained alive. Children played outside the cabins. Gardens slowly began to grow. Smoke rose gently from stone fireplaces. For a brief moment, the dream of a permanent English settlement seemed possible. Captain John White watched with quiet pride. He believed the hardest days were finally behind them. He could not know that fate was already preparing to separate him from the people he loved most. Life inside the colony began to grow more uncertain with each passing week. Food supplies continued to shrink. The settlers worked tirelessly, but the harvest would take time. Without fresh supplies from England, survival became increasingly difficult. The leaders gathered to discuss their future. There was only one realistic solution. Someone had to return to England and bring back food, tools, medicine, and more settlers. Everyone knew the journey would be dangerous. The Atlantic Ocean was vast and unpredictable. Storms could destroy entire fleets. Months, or even years, could pass before another ship returned. John White faced an impossible choice. As governor of the colony, he felt responsible for every family living there. But he was also a father and a grandfather. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, had recently given birth to a baby girl. Her name was Virginia Dare. She was the first English child ever born in the New World. Leaving his family behind was the hardest decision John White had ever made. Still, the colony desperately needed help. There was no other option. Before boarding the ship, White gathered the settlers together. He gave them one final instruction. If they ever decided to leave the settlement, they must carve their destination into wood. And if they were forced to leave because of danger, they should carve a Maltese cross beside the message. It was a simple plan, one that White believed would guide him when he finally returned. With heavy hearts, the settlers watched as his ship disappeared beyond the horizon. No one standing on that quiet shoreline could possibly imagine that it would be the last time John White would ever see them. The journey across the Atlantic was long and unforgiving. Powerful waves shook the wooden ship day after day. Cold winds filled the sails as Captain John White stood quietly looking west. His thoughts never left Roanoke. He imagined his daughter Eleanor waiting patiently. He imagined little Virginia Dare, now nearly 3 years old, running between the wooden cottages. Every mile brought him closer to the family he had left behind. Finally, in the summer of 1590, the coastline appeared. Dense forests stretched along the shore. The familiar island lay quietly beneath the evening sky, White's heart filled with relief. At last, the waiting was over. The sailors lowered a small boat into the calm water. Step by step, they reached the shore. Something immediately felt different. There was no sound, no children laughing, no barking dogs, no smoke rising, only the gentle wind. White called out the names of his friends. No one answered. The landing party walked slowly toward the settlement. Grass, wooden fences, nature, everything. Then the houses appeared, standing exactly where they had been built. Doors remained closed. Tools still rested. Nothing suggested a violent attack. Nothing suggested a desperate escape. The silence was almost impossible to understand. John White searched every cabin, every storage room, every corner of the village. His heart began to sink. One sailor stopped. He pointed toward a weathered wooden post into the timber, Croatoan. Reading it again and again, there was no Maltese cross, no warning, only one mysterious word by an entire colony, vanished. John White could not look away from the weathered wooden post. One word, Croatoan. It was the only message the colonists had left behind. There were no letters, no journal, no map, no explanation, only one word. At first, White felt confused. Then he remembered. Before leaving England, he had made an agreement with every settler. If they ever moved to another location, they must carve their destination into wood. And if they were forced to leave because of danger, they must also carve a Maltese cross. White searched carefully. He examined the wooden post, the nearby trees, the surrounding buildings. There was no cross. The word, Croatoan. His heart filled with hope. Croatoan was not an unfamiliar name. It was the name of a nearby island. The homeland maintained friendly relations. Perhaps the colony had simply moved. Perhaps food had become scarce. Perhaps they believed among old friends. It seemed a reasonable explanation. John White immediately decided to sail there. If the settlers had truly relocated, he would find them within days. But once again, fate intervened. Dark storm clouds gathered above the Atlantic, began pushing. The sea turned violent, towering waves against the wooden hulls. To continue, the ships themselves would be destroyed. John White pleaded again and again, but no one would risk the voyage. The fleet toward England, as Roanoke Island, into the distant mist. John White stood silently until the shoreline could no longer be seen. He never discovered what became of his daughter, his granddaughter, or the mysterious colony that vanished without a trace. News of the vanished colony spread quickly across England. An entire settlement had disappeared, without a battle, without a single witness, without leaving any clear explanation. For many, It seemed impossible. How could more than 100 people simply vanish? At first, some believed the settlers had joined the Croatoan people. Others wondered whether they had moved inland in search of better farmland. It was the most hopeful explanation, but not everyone agreed. Rumors soon began to spread. Some whispered that disease had swept through the colony. Others believed a powerful storm had destroyed everything. A few imagined that hostile tribes had attacked, leaving no survivors. Yet, there was almost no evidence to support any of these ideas. Then decades, the forests continued to grow. Wooden houses collapsed beneath wind and rain. Nature slowly erased almost every trace of the little English settlement. Still, explorers, historians, returned again and again to Roanoke Island. Some searched the nearby islands. Others followed rivers. Many hoped to discover a forgotten village, a hidden grave, or perhaps a single diary waiting beneath the soil. But every expedition returned with more questions than answers. The mystery only grew deeper. Each generation, another possibility, another unanswered question. The lost colony, more than history, it was becoming a legend, passed from one generation to the next. And even today, more than 4 centuries later, still keep many of their secrets. As the years passed, the silence surrounding Roanoke became even more mysterious. Without answers, people began creating theories. Some sounded reasonable, others seemed almost impossible. The first theory was also the simplest. Perhaps the colonists had peacefully joined the Croatoan people. The English settlers already knew that tribe. Relations had once been friendly. Food, shelter, and protection could all be found there. If survival had become impossible, moving to Croatoan may have been their only choice. Some historians still believe this is the most likely explanation, yet no written record has ever confirmed it. Another theory, the settlers traveled inland, away from the coast, away from dangerous storms, searching for more fertile land, better hunting, perhaps an entirely new village that has never been discovered. Disease may have devastated the colony. Far from England, without doctors, even a simple illness could become deadly. Influenza, or an unknown infection, might have spread quickly through the small community. But once again, no graves, no medical records, and no physical evidence have ever been found. Some imagined a violent attack, perhaps from a rival tribe, from Spanish soldiers who considered the English colony a threat. Spain, much of the New World, an English settlement, its interests. Yet, Spanish records never described the mystery, remained unsolved. Every theory, one question, but created, and with each passing century, became less a forgotten colony and more one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Centuries passed, yet the mystery refused to disappear. Every new generation returned to Roanoke, hoping to uncover one final clue. archaeologists began carefully studying the island. Instead of searching for treasure, they searched for tiny fragments of everyday life, broken pieces of pottery, rusted nails, glass beads, animal bones. Even the smallest object could reveal an important story. Slowly, evidence began to emerge. Not dramatic discoveries, but quiet, thoughtful clues were found far beyond the original settlement, deep inland, near rivers, close to areas had once lived, have belonged, or had they simply been traded between different peoples? No one could say with certainty. Then, researchers discovered, drawn by John White himself, one map contained curious detail. Hidden beneath a small paper patch appeared the outline of what looked like a forgotten fort. Had White secretly planned to establish another settlement? Did some colonists travel there after he departed? Again, raised more questions. Modern technology, the search, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, laser mapping, advanced archaeological surveys, the settlers could never have imagined. Researchers continue the forests, the rivers, each expedition hoping to uncover of Roanoke's story, but the forest remains patient, the secrets protected by time and by silence. Perhaps somewhere beneath those quiet trees, the final answer still waits to be discovered. Long before modern historians began searching for answers, the mystery of Roanoke lived quietly through spoken stories. Native American communities passed history from one generation to the next. Around evening fires, elders shared memories of distant events and unfamiliar visitors who had arrived from across the great ocean, recorded remarkable conversations, spoke of people who looked different, people with light-colored eyes, different clothing, different tools. Some accounts even described who could read or write simple English words. These stories captured the imagination of historians. Could they be the descendants of the lost colonists? Had the settlers chosen survival by becoming part of Native American society? Over time, languages blend, customs evolve, children grow up instead of one. Within only a few generations, may have looked very different from the people who first arrived. If that happened, the colony simply changed gradually. Yet, there is another possibility, is never perfect. Stories change from one generation to another. Small details become larger. Simple events become legends. Even today, historians continue to compare ancient oral traditions with archaeology, maps, and written documents. Sometimes the pieces seem to fit together. Sometimes they drift apart like leaves carried gently across a quiet river. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between history and memory, a place where facts and stories meet, and where the mystery of Roanoke continues to whisper across the centuries. One detail has puzzled historians for centuries. When entire communities disappear, they usually leave behind graves, burial grounds, memorials, something to remember those who came before. Yet, at Roanoke, no cemetery has ever been found, not a single confirmed grave belonging to the lost settlers. This absence raises an important question. If disease destroyed the colony, where are the dead? If war swept through the settlement, why were no remains discovered? If starvation claimed their lives, why did no one bury their loved ones? The silence of the landscape speaks almost as loudly as the missing people. Archaeologists have searched carefully. They have explored fields, woodlands, and the shoreline. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden shapes beneath the earth. Some appeared promising: old foundations, ancient fire pits, natural formations, but none provided clear evidence of a colonial cemetery. Perhaps the settlers did not die on Roanoke Island. Perhaps they left long before death reached them. Perhaps their final resting places lie somewhere else, still hidden beneath distant forests or forgotten villages. There is another possibility. Time itself may have erased the evidence.
Wooden grave markers root slowly
into the soil. Coastal storms shift the shoreline. Floods carry away entire sections of land. Over 4 centuries, nature has transformed the island again and again. What once stood in open fields may now rest beneath marshland or beneath the sea itself. Every expedition adds another piece to the puzzle, yet the picture remains incomplete. The missing graves, that some mysteries are defined not by what we find, but by what, and perhaps somewhere beneath the final chapter of Roanoke, undisturbed. More than 400 years have passed since the people of Roanoke disappeared. Empires have risen and fallen. Nations have been born. Technology has transformed the world. Yet the mystery remains. Each generation has searched with new ideas, new tools, new hope. Historians read forgotten letters. Archaeologists carefully uncover the smallest fragments hidden beneath the soil. Scientists study ancient landscapes from satellites high above the earth. Every discovery brings excitement. Every clue raises fresh questions. Perhaps that is why the lost colony still fascinates us today. It is not only a mystery about missing people. It is a story about hope, about courage, about families who crossed an ocean searching for a better future. They left behind everything they had ever known: their homes, their friends, their country. They believed a new life awaited them across the sea. Whether they found safety or hardship, whether they lived for many years or only a short time, their story never truly ended. Continues every time someone asks the same simple question: what really happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Perhaps one day a forgotten document will emerge. Perhaps a new archaeological discovery will reveal the missing chapter. Or perhaps the forests will keep their silence forever. Some mysteries refuse to be solved, and maybe that is exactly why they endure. As the evening grows quiet and the stars appear above the Atlantic coast, imagine the gentle sound of waves touching the same shoreline where those settlers once stood. The wind through the ancient trees, the ocean against the sand, and somewhere between history and legend, the lost colony of Roanoke continues to wait. History is often remembered through great victories, powerful kings, famous battles, and magnificent cities. But sometimes, the stories that endure the longest are the quiet ones, the unfinished ones, the questions that history never fully answered. Roanoke became one of those stories. It was England's first serious attempt to build a permanent home in the New World. Although the colony disappeared, its dream did not. Only 17 years later, another group of settlers crossed the Atlantic. This time, they founded Jamestown. Unlike Roanoke, Jamestown survived. It struggled, nearly failed, but it endured. The lessons learned from Roanoke helped shape every English colony that followed. Future settlers carried more supplies, built stronger defenses, prepared for longer isolation, and sought more reliable relationships with the native peoples who already called these lands home. In that quiet way, Roanoke changed history, not because it succeeded, but because others learned from its silence. Even today, its influence can still be felt. Books continue to be written, documentaries continue to be filmed, researchers continue to search, and travelers still visit the quiet shores of Roanoke Island. They walk among the trees, listen to the gentle wind, and wonder whether the answer has been waiting there all along. Perhaps one day, a forgotten letter will be discovered. Perhaps a buried settlement will finally emerge from beneath the forest floor. Or perhaps the lost colony will remain a timeless mystery, one that reminds us that history does not always every answer, simply leaves us carried softly across the centuries. As daylight faded across Roanoke Island, the forest slowly came alive. Tall pines swayed gently in the evening breeze. The sound was almost unchanged from the days when the settlers first arrived. Birds settled into their nests. Crickets filled the air with quiet rhythm. The Atlantic Ocean continued its endless conversation with the shore. Nature remembered even when people forgot. The wooden houses were long gone. Their roofs had collapsed. Their walls returned to the earth. Grass covered the paths where children once played. Tree roots wrapped themselves around forgotten stones. Season after season, year after year, the island slowly reclaimed everything. Yet sometimes, history leaves behind invisible footprints, a broken nail, a fragment, a pottery, a tiny glass bead buried beneath centuries of soil. To most people, they seem ordinary, but to an archaeologist, they are whispers from another time. Each object carries a story: a family preparing dinner, a carpenter building a doorway, a child holding a small toy. Simple moments that history almost forgot. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the colony vanished. Perhaps it is how ordinary their lives once were. They laughed, they worried, they celebrated, they hoped. They were not characters in a legend. They were people who dreamed of building across an unfamiliar ocean. That dream still echoes of Roanoke. That passes through those ancient trees, seems to carry one quiet reminder: does not disappear, waits patiently to listen. Some mysteries fade quietly into history. As generations pass, they are slowly forgotten. Their stories disappear beneath the weight of time. But Roanoke was different. It refused to be forgotten. For more than 4 centuries, writers, explorers, historians, and dreamers have returned again and again to the same quiet island, each believing they might finally uncover the missing truth. Some searched ancient maps. Others studied faded letters written in careful ink. Archaeologists dug patiently through layers of earth, looking for the smallest forgotten clue. Yet the mystery remained. Perhaps that is why Roanoke still captures our imagination. It reminds us that history is not always complete. Some pages have been lost. Some voices have fallen silent. Some journeys leave no final chapter. As the sun sets over the Atlantic, the island grows quiet once more. Golden light fades into soft blue evening. The wind moves gently through the tall pines. The waves continue their endless rhythm upon the shore, exactly as they did more than 400 years ago. If you stood there today, you would hear only nature. No footsteps, no sign of the families who once dreamed of building a new beginning. Their presence, not in buildings, not in monuments, but in the questions to inspire curiosity, wonder, perhaps to remind us, still waits, settles gently. The lost colony continues its timeless secret to anyone willing to listen. In the late 16th century, much of North America remained unknown to the people of Europe. Maps ended abruptly. Beyond them, cartographers often wrote simple words: unknown lands, unexplored wilderness. or sometimes nothing at all. For the settlers of Roanoke, every journey beyond the trees led into uncertainty. Every river might reveal a new opportunity or a hidden danger. The forests seemed endless, towering oaks, ancient pines, and quiet marshlands stretched farther than anyone could see. To those arriving from England, the landscape felt both beautiful and overwhelming. The familiar world was gone. Every sound was unfamiliar, every path a mystery. Yet the native peoples had lived here for countless generations. They understood the changing seasons, the rivers, the wildlife, the hidden trails that crossed the forests like invisible roads. To them, the land was not mysterious. It was home. Perhaps the greatest challenge was not the wilderness itself, but learning to understand it. Survival, observation, respect. Those who adapted had hope. Those who resisted, as time passed, may have discovered that the only way forward was not to conquer the land. Part of it changed their destiny. On Roanoke, the wilderness, every decision they made. If you walk quietly, you may notice sunlight filters softly, birdsong across the trees. The wind moves without hurry. It is difficult that such a tranquil place could hold one of history's greatest unanswered mysteries. Sometimes, the quietest places, among all those who disappeared, the children, perhaps touch our hearts the most. They had crossed an endless ocean without choosing their journey. They trusted their parents. They believed the strange new world would become their home. Some were only a few years old. Others were still learning to speak. Among them was Virginia Dare, the first English child born in North America. Her birth filled the colony with hope. To the settlers, she represented a new beginning, a future where generations would grow. Far from England, John White, her grandfather, looked upon her with pride. When he sailed back to England, he believed he would return before she was old enough to remember his absence. Instead, 3 long years passed. He returned. Virginia Dare had vanished along with everyone else.
No grave, no farewell.
Over the centuries have grown around her name. Some imagined among Native American families far inland. Some stories into a mythical figure forever wandering. Beautiful stories, but history, only possibilities. Virginia Dare, perhaps she became, perhaps who never knew, or perhaps her story than anyone hoped. Yet her name, not because we know her fate, she reminds us that history, not only by kings and explorers, by ordinary families who dreamed of a peaceful tomorrow. Roanoke Island has changed many times over the centuries. The wooden houses are gone. The original paths have disappeared. The forests have grown thicker. The shoreline has slowly shifted with every passing storm. Yet, the island has never truly forgotten its history. Visitors arrive from around the world. Some come out of curiosity, others out of admiration for the courage of those early settlers. Many simply wish to stand in the place where one of history's greatest mysteries began. As they walk beneath towering trees, the island feels remarkably peaceful. Birds sing softly. The wind moves gently through the branches. Sunlight dances. Nothing about the landscape suggests that an entire community, perhaps, is what makes so unforgettable. It reminds us that extraordinary events in extraordinary places, the greatest mysteries, are hidden where people once laughed, shared meals of brighter tomorrows. To study every artifact, each discovery, but no single answer, the mystery completely continues to challenge our imagination. It gives us answers, but because that history still cannot answer, and perhaps as long as the Atlantic waves continue touching those quiet shores, the lost colony, it will remain that some stories are destined not through certainty, but through mystery. Today, the search continues, not with wooden ships or handwritten maps, but with technology beyond anything the settlers could have imagined. Archaeologists walk slowly across the island. Every careful step may uncover a forgotten clue. Ground-penetrating radar looks beneath the earth without disturbing the soil. Powerful scanners reveal hidden shapes buried for centuries. Satellite images capture patterns invisible from the ground. Even tiny fragments of pottery, glass, or metal can tell remarkable stories. Sometimes, researchers discover of ancient fireplaces, pieces of English ceramics, sometimes evidence. Each discovery adds another piece, yet has answered the greatest question, where some researchers believe gradually joined nearby native communities, traveled in different directions, perhaps for many years, others history. One simple answer is rarely. Every expedition ends the same way, with notebooks, new theories, fresh questions, to return again, because somewhere, the forests, the rivers, the final clue may still exist, as it has for more than patiently beneath the earth, beneath the trees, patiently to discover the story. As the centuries continue to pass, the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of history's most enduring mysteries, not because it is the oldest, not because it is the largest, but because it left behind almost nothing. No final letter,
No farewell. No eyewitness.
only silence, and a single word carved into weathered wood, Croatoan. For historians, the mystery is an endless puzzle. For archaeologists, it is a search that may continue, but for the rest of us, it is something different. It is a reminder that history, with satellites and advanced science, Some questions remain unanswered. That is what makes so unforgettable. It reminds us, does not always, sometimes, and the settlers who crossed the Atlantic were ordinary people, parents. They dreamed rich harvests, safe futures. Instead, they became greatest mysteries. Tonight, imagine the quiet island beneath a blanket of stars, the Atlantic Ocean breathing gently against the shore, the tall pine trees in the evening wind. Somewhere, those ancient forests, or perhaps the final chapter of the lost colony, waiting patiently for the day finally remembers what the island, perhaps the greatest mistake, is assuming the colonists were victims. What if they made a choice? Not a desperate escape, but a careful decision.
Imagine.
The final meeting inside the little settlement. Food was becoming scarce. The seasons were changing. No ship had appeared for years. Gathered quietly, they looked toward the forests, toward the rivers. Who understood far better than they did? They realized that remaining on Roanoke Island, slowly disappearing, offered hope, a better chance for their children. Simple tools, blankets, the houses. There was no reason they might return someday. Someone walked toward the wooden post, taking a knife they carefully carved. One final message, Croatoan, was needed. The people, its meaning, John White, or so they believed. Then, as morning light, the little procession into the forest, children, dogs, followed behind. Of footsteps slowly faded, leaving only the whisper of the wind. Perhaps Roanoke was ever, and the first day began an entirely new life. If that is true, then the mystery is not about how they vanished, how completely they became a world, that history. If the settlers reached Croatoan or another nearby village, life would have changed very quickly. The familiar world of England would have faded little by little. The heavy wool clothing would have been replaced by garments better suited to the warm summers and mild winters of coastal America. The forests would become their marketplace, the rivers, their highways. The changing seasons, instead of waiting, they would learn upon the land itself. Native American hunters, how to track deer, how to catch fish, how to gather medicinal plants and edible roots, would learn fastest, speaking new languages their parents had known. The forests would not seem strange. Be home. As years passed, might slowly fade, would blend with new ones. Families would grow, would know little called England, perhaps still remembered narrow streets across the Atlantic. The youngest may never have seen that world at all. History often tells stories, but sometimes history changes not through war, not through victory, but through people learning. If this happened, Then the lost colony simply became something new, something that written history, and somewhere, hidden within generations of forgotten families, the legacy of Roanoke may still quietly live on. Time has a remarkable way of changing stories. Facts become memories, memories become legends, and legends sometimes preserve a small piece of truth. For generations, families living along the Carolina coast shared unusual tales, stories of fair-haired strangers, people who spoke differently, families unlike those some early English travelers. They described communities whose ancestors from across the sea referred to the lost colony with certainty. Among the most intriguing clues to Roanoke is not always written, sometimes only in conversation, telling a story to her grandchildren, remembering what was told. Each generation adds a little, changes a little, until the original story becomes almost impossible, even so, a small truth to survive. Perhaps of the lost colony lived a peaceful life without ever knowing that centuries later would search for their beginning. They simply believed exactly where they were, may remember the disappearance, may have quietly continued far beyond of the written record, and somewhere the voices of Roanoke softly. Every mystery has witnesses. Some speak, some remain silent, and some disappear forever. John White was the last person to know the colony as it truly was. He remembered the sound of children's laughter, the freshly built cottages, the hopeful faces of families beginning a new life. When he returned 3 years later, everything had changed, yet he never stopped believing that they had survived. Until the end of his life, he searched in every rumor, every report, every possibility. No letter ever reached him.
No final goodbye.
As the man, but perhaps as the man who never gave up. His paintings, his journals have survived. Without them, the lost colony into complete obscurity. His careful observations to continue the search. The last witness does not solve the mystery, sometimes simply preserves it, and because recorded what he saw of Roanoke still speaks, not with certainty, not with answers that continue to echo. As evening settles gently over Roanoke Island, the mystery feels strangely peaceful. The Atlantic Ocean continues its endless rhythm. The same waves that carried the English settlers across the sea still wash quietly against the shore. The pine trees still sway in the coastal breeze. The stars still appear one by one above the darkening sky. Nature has continued this timeless cycle. Spring follows winter, summer follows spring. Autumn leaves upon the forest floor, year after year, century after century, has remained silent, watching the tragedy to an end. The island remembers, but it does not speak. Perhaps needs a final answer, exist, not to be solved, of the fragile nature of human history. Entire communities can disappear. Names, faces, and voices can be lost, yet memory, because people continue asking, continue wondering, has never truly vanished. As people, but their story lives on, of the wind, through the trees, along the shore. Every quiet evening seems to carry the same timeless question: where did they go? But rather, those who dreamed of building at the very edge of the known world, as you slowly close your eyes, will continue to keep watch, patiently, silently, until another dawn. Night has finally fallen across the quiet shores of Roanoke Island. The sky is filled with countless stars, just as it was more than 4 centuries ago. The moon casts a gentle light across the Atlantic Ocean. Small waves rise and fall in a rhythm that never seems to end. Somewhere, long ago, the settlers may have stood on this very shoreline, looking upward at these same stars, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Perhaps they hoped a ship would soon appear on the horizon. Perhaps they had already accepted their forever home. History remains silent. The ocean keeps its own memories.
Carries no answers.
Moving softly through the ancient trees, the greatest mysteries teach us but about ourselves. They remind us how fragile every journey can be. Every ordinary moment truly is. The families of Roanoke, that history would remember them. They simply wished to build homes, plant gardens, and begin again. Were simple. Their hopes were familiar. Their story could have belonged, and perhaps that is why, because beneath every great mystery, there are ordinary people. Until history, as the night, allow the sound of the distant sea to carry your thoughts far across the Atlantic, toward a quiet island where one mystery still sleeps. Every journey eventually comes to an end. Some end with celebration, some with discovery, and some simply fade into silence. The story of Roanoke has no final chapter,
No closing sentence.
no certain ending, only possibilities carried gently across the centuries. Perhaps the settlers found peace among new friends. Perhaps their children lived long, happy lives beneath unfamiliar skies. Perhaps their descendants walked these forests, never knowing that history would one day search for them. Or perhaps, beyond endurance, the truth that is not of their story, what matters most, took to sail toward a future that no one, their hope, was real. Their dreams, even if history, how those dreams ended. Tonight, the forests remain calm, continues its endless rhythm. The stars above the island, as they did Nature has never hurried, watched, remembered, and perhaps, somewhere, the final answer still rests, waiting for no one to remain. One of history's and enduring mysteries. There are stories that history finishes for us. We know how they begin. We know how they end. But Roanoke is different. This final page was never written. Instead, history simply pauses, leaving space for imagination, for curiosity, and for quiet reflection. Perhaps that is why this mystery has survived for more than 400 years, not because it is unsolved, but because that not every question continue long after every generation saw adventure, saw missing records, saw hidden evidence, saw possibility. Each discovered something meaningful. None discovered the complete truth. The island never intended to reveal, perhaps, the silence of its story rises higher. The forest falls completely still. Only the distant sound of waves remains, gentle, steady, timeless. Somewhere, beyond the trees, beyond the rivers, beyond the reach of written history of those settlers, may have continued in ways no one expected, or perhaps they simply became part of the landscape itself, carried forever by the wind. And as another peaceful night, the island asks nothing of us except to remember not only the mystery, but the people whose hopes turned into one of history's most enduring legends. As time continued its endless journey, the lost colony became something greater than a forgotten settlement. It became part of history itself. Children learned the story in classrooms. Travelers visited the quiet island. Writers filled countless pages, searching for answers. Filmmakers brought the mystery, yet that is the reason, in our imagination, that history, a record of facts, a collection of unanswered questions, invites us to imagine, to explore. The people who vanished from Roanoke never expected, they never imagined that centuries later, people around the world would still speak. They were ordinary people, builders, fathers, children, neighbors, dreamers. Was simply, instead, they became most unforgettable mysteries. Settles, the waves continue, the wind still moves, the stars still shine. Everything feels timeless, as though the land itself is patiently waiting for someone. The story it has protected for 100 years. And now, our journey comes gently to its end. The mystery of Roanoke has traveled across more than for centuries, through storms, across oceans, into forgotten forests, and into the imagination of generations. We may never know exactly what happened to those settlers. Perhaps they found peace. Perhaps they found hardship. Perhaps their story continued quietly, far beyond the pages of history. Whatever their fate, their courage will always remain. They crossed an endless ocean with hope in their hearts, searching not for fame, not for glory, but simply for a better tomorrow. Tonight, the island rests peacefully. The Atlantic Ocean continues its endless lullaby. The ancient trees sway gently in the cool night breeze. Above them, the same stars still shine just as they did on those quiet evenings so many centuries ago. Perhaps some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Perhaps they exist to remind us that the world still holds places of wonder, places where imagination walks beside history. As sleep begins to find you, allow the waves to carry away the questions. Allow the quiet forest to calm your thoughts. Allow the night to become still. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening exploring history together. May your dreams be calm. May your night be restful. And until our next journey, good night. Sleep well.